Hi, and welcome back to the Still Rolling BJJ podcast. I'm Matthew Montgomery. Today's guest is one that I've shared the mats with for probably close to a decade, and someone whose journey through martial arts and coaching has inspired countless students and teammates. Greg Frangos grew up in Wooster, Ohio, where he found his first passion in lacrosse, earning all Ohio honors and playing Division I at Butler before transferring to Wittenberg, where he both played and coached while developing his judo. Greg's martial arts resume is impressive. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, Judo Nidan, which is a second-degree black belt, traditional Jiu-Jitsu Shodan, brown belt in Shin Gi Tai Jiu-Jitsu, and green belt in Tomiki Aikido. He competed at collegiate judo nationals 3 times and later coached judo for Team Chitwood. Beyond martial arts, Greg has coached high school lacrosse, worked as a director of engineering and software, and now serves as a president of RB Powers Company, a 118-year-old business manufacturing ribbons, rosettes, and awards. Today, we're going to talk about his martial arts and coaching background, his 5 best pieces of advice from his epic black belt speech, I was there, and what he's been up to since then. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me.
So, Greg, we have trained together for a while. I actually kind of joke that for a while I was like your pet white belt, where you'd come and snag me every session and beat me up, but teach me along the way. Let's start with, you have one of the most well-rounded martial arts resumes of anybody I know. What got you started, and then what drew you to the different disciplines?
Well, as a kid growing up, you see the Kung Fu movies, the Bruce Lee movies, and, I had a couple of neighbor kids in my neighborhood that had taken some karate lessons back in the day. And I grew up from 0 to 10. I grew up in a little town called Rittman that's near Worcester. And there was no martial arts in town. The nearest martial arts school was 15 minutes away in Wadsworth. And as a proud Gen Xer growing up with a dad who was the silent generation and always working, always as a traveling salesman, just always out there providing for the family, and a mom that's an early era boomer. They were my ability to go do any sports, do any activities, or learn martial arts was limited to the extent to which I could pedal my butt out of town. So the opportunity to go train martial arts at a very young age was not there for me. My parents at the time didn't have the inclination to be my chauffeur. We moved to Worcester when I was about 10 years old and never really followed. There were some martial arts schools in Worcester, but it wasn't until high school. A friend of mine named Brian Smith moved into town from Wyoming. He and his brother Rob had trained some Hawaiian Kempo, and he and I became friends, and he introduced me to a movie called Bloodsport. And as most kids that grew up around that age, once Jean-Claude started doing those pretty kicks, everybody wanted to do that. And so we did what most people do: is we started training in his basement, and he started beating the crap out of me there. And we'd pull some other friends into it. A girl that we went to school with was a black belt in Kung Fu, and she came and trained with us. And then I eventually trained with her a little bit at the College of Worcester in her instructor's class for a few months. And a lot of different striking, a lot of it informal, a lot of it in basements and garages, that kind of thing. Even when I went to school my freshman year of college, I was training with a martial arts training club in like the lounge of the dorm on carpeted floors, sitting on top of slab. You didn't want to take a fall on those things, and you sure were not rolling with anyone the way we do today. But it was a lot of informal stuff. And it wasn't until the summer after my freshman year of college that my friend Brian Smith found, he had taken some traditional jiu-jitsu when he was in college at Case Western. And we decided, hey, we're going to actually go to a school and train martial arts this summer. And we started off taking some karate classes, and quickly he found this grizzled old guy that was on the outskirts of town with this broken down old place that was teaching judo. And so we were like, hey, why not give it a try? I don't know what judo really is, but give it a try. Let's see what's out there. And it was pretty quickly we dropped the karate lessons. So, just we found something that was different, something that was hard, and something that had real world application. And keep in mind, this is in 1993, and the timeline of that with
Yeah.
most understanding where martial arts was going around that time. That was right around the time
It's a
a few
magic
months
year.
before the first UFC occurred. My judo instructor had a long history. He actually came up under a gentleman by the name of Doug Grant, who is a fixture in the Columbus judo community and is responsible for most of the judo in Central Ohio. One of my instructor, his top student overall, was a guy by the name of John Saylor, who was the three-time national champion, head coach of the Olympic Training Center for most of the 80s, and our friend Sean Chitwood's judo instructor as well. So we stepped into a really amazing lineage in this broken down old building on the outskirts of town, and it was quite the adventure right from the get go. And John had moved back to Ohio from Colorado and was actually not too far down the road, and that's where he was teaching Shingetai Jiu-Jitsu. And Shingetai was mixed martial arts before there was a term called mixed martial arts, where he was combining wrestling, he was combining boxing, he was combining Muay Thai and judo, and he'll tell you that 90% of what of Shingetai Jiu-Jitsu was from our coach's judo. So there was a very strong application to self-defense and fighting prowess within the training for judo, which is a sport.
Okay. I'm realizing I totally butchered Shigetai.
Oh, good. John will come and talk to you. He's getting up there in age, but he's 6'3" and used to walk around at about 260, built like a Greek god. And he will tell you exactly how it is. No, he's a good guy.
I think maybe people outside of Ohio have no idea. I mean, there's so much great martial arts history and lineage that has landed kind of in this little area. I don't know the why. I don't know if it's maybe a cultural affinity for wrestling and combat sports, if it grew up that way or what it was. Do you think
sometimes it's circumstance? Yeah, Doug Grant, I think, grew up in this area. I've never met the gentleman. He was a longtime police officer with Worthington PD. He used to run all the security for the Arnold. But Doug was a Marine. Apparently, he fought in the Chosin Reservoir back in Korea.
Wow.
As a Marine, you know that
Yeah.
history. He, after the war, he stayed and trained for years with a Korean gentleman. That's how he learned judo in Korea, and brought that back to Ohio. And like I said, most of the judo that happens in Central Ohio stems from him and his teaching.
That's awesome. Do you think, and obviously you were already in college when you're really getting deep into martial arts, so I guess maybe I already know the answer to this question, but I was going to ask, do you think that, because you played collegiate sports at a high level, high enough to be D1, do you feel like your discipline in lacrosse helped you in martial arts, or do you think working martial arts helped you in lacrosse?
A couple of years after I started training with my judo coach, I invited him to come out and watch me play lacrosse. I was playing in a high school alumni game. And after I walked off the field, he came over to me and said, "You're in trouble." "What did I do, coach?" And he said that he had never seen that kind of intensity from me on the judo mats that he saw playing lacrosse. I don't know what feeds what, but I can tell you that my approach personally to playing team sports was different than my approach to playing individual sports. For a lot of years, I really went through sports aimlessly. I tried every sport when I was a kid. But I didn't really ever know why I was doing it. I didn't really have a direction to it. I really wasn't motivated. I'd go out there and I'd go through the motions. I'd do the thing because that's what I was supposed to do. And it was being part of something. And there I was. When they started a lacrosse team my freshman year of high school, and by the first game I had taken over as the starting goalie, that's when, oh my goodness, like this is real. I'm starting varsity high school goalie as a freshman, and goalie in lacrosse is the equivalent of a quarterback. You're the guy that sees everything on the field. Your voice should be hoarse at the end of the game because you've been yelling instruction, yelling positions, calling out defensive slides, everything to the defensive half of the field the entire game. And so there's a lot of responsibility that comes with playing goalie, and you also got to be a little crazy because that thing hurts when it hits you. But it taught me a different approach to the game, to sports, that I had not been exposed to at that point. I suddenly found myself with a lot of responsibility, but also the mental aspect of it, of so many moving parts happening in such a condensed timeline, because it's a fast game and there's a lot of things around you, and you're having to have your head on a swivel and see all these things happening at once and see kind of the chess match happening. That intensity was something that was new for me. It took me a while to find that in judo, because in judo, it's me and another guy, and I never really was into, I wrestled a little bit in middle school, but I was never really that into individualized sports. And so I had to find that. And that getting called out by my coach, and being aware that I had different modes that I was unaware of, that was a really big step for me in becoming more intense and more deliberate with my judo training, as well as execution during tournaments. Because, I needed to find a little bit of that fire that I didn't quite have yet.
I think I identify with that. I never played lacrosse. I did play quarterback in high school. I've watched a little lacrosse, and I had no idea that basically a lacrosse goalie is doing kind of a football quarterback's job.
It's a very
But
mental position. Yeah.
well, mental is one way to put it. There's a couple of different mental ways that I think about it, because I've watched lacrosse. A lacrosse ball is hard like a hockey puck, but a lacrosse goalie is not dressed like a hockey goalie.
No,
It's
no.
insane to me when I watch, and maybe the ball doesn't go as fast as a puck off of a stick, but I know that there's some dudes that can whip that ball.
I've taken a dinger off the shins at 90 plus
Ooh,
miles an hour. And let me tell you something, you wake up pretty quick after that if you were sleeping. It stings.
yeah.
But
And
I always tell people the best way to make a good lacrosse goalie is take all your survival instincts and teach them to do the opposite.
throw them out the
Hey, the
window.
ball's coming at you. Step in front of it.
So the Marine Corps should be
Put your head
recruiting
as
hockey
close as
goalies
possible.
or lacrosse
That's
goalies.
right.
Um, That's pretty cool. Yeah, I had no idea. I do understand the concept about different modes and different levels of intensity based on the activity. Having played other team sports, I can be a very competitive, intense human being. But in individual sports, at least like when I've competed, you know, done jiu-jitsu tournaments, I it's not anywhere near the same type, and not kind of as far as intensity, but it's a different kind of intensity. I think there's more nervousness, and maybe it just has to do with trusting uh, my own ability, and I have no one else to back me up because it's just me out there. But
Yeah,
uh,
I get that. I struggled in judo with people that I had never fought before.
mhm.
Vitor was kind of the opposite, right? What he was saying is guys that he's lost to before, he would be a little more nervous. I don't think he used the word intimidated, but he'd be a little more nervous about him. I'm the opposite. I'm nervous about somebody I've never laid hands on before. I'm like, what is this person going to do to me?
Yeah,
And then once there are very few people that I fought repetitively in judo that I didn't eventually beat. And some of them, I may have lost them once and then I owned them from that point on. But that was a very different take for me, in that somehow I could get past the fear of the unknown and realize that, no, I'm strong, I'm quick, I've got what it takes to survive and very likely win this match. And suddenly it became more comfortable, and I was able to just kind of get past myself and get onto the match, which is the important part of psychology when it comes to combative sports.
yeah. Um, when you stopped playing lacrosse, did you ever have a period where there was no martial arts? So
Now, so I was, like I said, after my freshman year of college is when I started doing judo, and I think my first tournament was about 6 months after I started, and this was during the school year of my sophomore year, when I transferred to Wittenberg, and I think like a month after that I fought in the state championship as a yellow belt. at some point, once you get your editing skills up, you should have some B footage rolling. This is the point where I would share with you the video of me getting bounced on the top of my head by a second-degree black belt when I was a yellow belt fighting in the state championship. It's a great little clip of film. So my sophomore year of college, I was playing lacrosse with Wittenberg, Division III. I was a glorified backup for at Division One. I was at the bottom of the depth chart. We had some just world beaters out there. And I transferred to Wittenberg, and we had a senior and another guy that was my age that it's like, I could probably beat these guys out, but I'd been going so hard at it for 6 years at that point. It was wonderful, but I was kind of getting burned on it, and I was really falling in love with judo. And so during that school year, I'm training judo and competing in judo tournaments. And then springtime rolls around, and I set the judo aside for lacrosse season. The problem was, after that year, I realized that I needed to make a choice because I went that and that was spring of '93. No, sorry, spring of '94. That year, when I was still playing lacrosse, the Collegiate National Judo Championships were held at Ohio State. So didn't have anything going on with the team that day. So I went and watched those, and knowing that that's where I wanted to be. And so I knew I needed to make a choice that state championships, collegiate nationals, and senior nationals were all in the springtime, right during lacrosse season. And I thought about it. And then that summer, after training judo for several more months with my coach back in Worcester, I decided that I was going to go ahead and not play lacrosse anymore, and I was going to dive full time into competitive judo. I would train during my coach in Worcester. You talked about training at multiple academies. I actually had an instructor down in Yellow Springs by the name of Jim Linane, and some amazing black belts down there that I love to death. And Mr. Linane was very kind in recognizing the fact that if I was going to come train with him during the school year, I would absolutely be his student. I would absolutely support his team. But when it came to competition time, my coach was going to coach me. I was going to compete under my coach's organization. That was my primary coach. I was going to take all my promotions from him. And Mr. Linane was gracious in having me as a permanent guest. And for the rest of college, I trained there 2 days a week. And once I got the branch of my instructors club running at Wittenberg in '95, I would train a couple days a week and teach a couple days a week. And so I'd get my training time in down in Yellow Springs. So it was a wonderful setup. And then summers we would be training 4 or 5 days a week. I would probably compete 15 times a year, 20 times a year if I could. We'd be all over the Midwest, finding whatever tournament we could drum up. There was times when one time I took my collegiate team from Wittenberg over to IU for a tournament on Saturday, and one of the guys that lived in Michigan couldn't make that one. So I went, and he and I just drove up to Delta City, Michigan, or Delta College, and I competed on Sunday after competing on Saturday, and I medaled in both tournaments. Like, things you do when you're 22 years old and you can get away with it.
Right now it's a big deal if I train
2
2 days in a row.
6 months is a tall order at this age.
Yeah. But you've basically been an athlete your entire adult life then. So, I mean, if lacrosse ended and you were straight into judo and competing and doing martial arts, and then obviously now, jiu-jitsu, I mean, it's
funny. I never really thought of myself as an athlete. I just thought I did sports all the time.
Yeah. Okay.
An athlete was somebody that's good. An athlete is somebody that's got some ability. And for me, I would have other coaches come up to me after I walked off the judo mat and say, "You fought a really smart match." And that was a common thing. Not man, you're a beast out there. Man, you're so this and that. No, you fought smart. And starting judo at that age, and going out there, and my first time competing, I told you, like, summer of '93 was when I first started judo. By March of 1995, I was up at West Point. Our buddy Sean Chitwood was on the other mat for me at the time, competing in the same tournament. I was up at West Point competing in the Collegiate Nationals for the first time, less than 2 years after I started judo.
Wow.
Which is insane. So how do you get to that level of competition in such a short amount of time? How did I get to brown belt in a couple of years? Now, granted, that's a lot shorter than our jiu-jitsu friends are used to, but it's equivalent. A judo black belt's equivalent to a purple belt, I would say, about 6 years on average. So think about being a blue belt or, yeah, blue belt. That's equivalent of a third degree brown belt in judo, the first brown belt. I got there in a couple of years, and I'm competing in a national level tournament. You don't get there by being dumb and just by being skilled. You have to have a coach that is trying to find the fastest way to get you to success, which means that my judo was not pretty. My judo, my technique, my throwing technique was never pretty at all. I was never a technically proficient thrower. But the way our judo instructor taught us was knock them down to the ground and maul them on the mat.
Okay.
And that's what we did. You know, in judo, it's pretty easy to win a match when you get somebody on the mat, because if you get in side control, if you get north south, if you get mount, if you get Keisugatami and you hold them there, nowadays it's 20 seconds. Match is over. You won.
Okay.
All it takes. You don't have to submit them once you get them in the hold down. So it's a very different sport with a very different set of rules. If you play it smart and if you know how to have the best strategy towards getting a win, you know, you do not have to be the most technically proficient thrower. That being said, it helps if you can do both.
Sure.
But on a condensed timeline, yeah, we were going up against guys that have been doing this for years and years and years and hanging with them. And my coach had a good system.
So Sean was also in that same collegiate nationals competing?
Yeah. So my instructor, Dave Shifley, and John Saylor, who was Sean's instructor. Again, Dave was John's coach for his early years up until basically his black belt, and then John went and trained elsewhere. Uh, they were like an old married couple sometime, where they'd be the best of friends and work together real closely at some time, and then wouldn't be to each other for months. And this was I had not met John yet. This was a period where they were not talking to each other, and John had been training Sean and several others judo, and I was on the one mat, and Sean, being coached by John, was over on the other mat. And since my coach and John weren't talking, I didn't get a chance to go meet him, and I could have met Sean Chitwood way back in 1995.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. You know, like you guys are different weight classes, I'm sure, but yeah, I was gonna ask if you actually competed directly with him, but
yeah, it took a few years before a couple of decades before I walked into Team Chitwood and started training with Sean. But when I found out that we came from the same judo lineage, I'm like, okay, I'm home.
That works.
Was the right place to be. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no absolute in judo, is there? So how did competing in the judo nationals teach you? You know, what lessons did it teach you as far as, like, you know, preparation and mindset?
You know, one of the things that I always struggled with was being in the best physical condition. I was not a crazy training. I didn't have good dietary practices. I lifted weights, but I didn't hit the cardio enough. I was always a little bit lacking in that area. And honestly, I still am today. I'm not the epitome of physical fitness, but that always held me back, I feel. And so one of the things I learned along the way was to be more prepared about things, and you know, be as close to possible of your physical health as you can, because no matter what your brain can do, your body has to carry you there. And the other thing is just, you know, the importance of drilling. You know, we were not into drilling as much as a lot of places. Again, technically, I was not a very proficient thrower. And so once you get to a certain level, you can run out of steam pretty quickly. My first year in the collegiate nationals in '95, I was out in the first round. I went there to learn how to lose. That was a good lesson. Myself and my buddy Brian Smith both went there, both lost in the first round. That's what we went to West Point for. The next year, he didn't choose to continue competing there, so I went with myself and my coach. We went out to San Jose State and fought in the collegiates in '96. That time I tied for fifth, and so started to progress my game a little bit and move forward and see some results of it. I fought my last year in '97 at University of Kansas. I was a black belt at that time, and found myself into the semifinals and ran up against a guy from the Olympic Training Center. But then that was in my weight class. In the open division, I also fought the guy that ended up winning my weight class, who was a three-time collegiate national champ and two-time senior national champ. Senior nationals, that's the national championship, right? Judo is an Olympic sport. There's one organization that governs the national championship. So, a lot of sports will have multiple national championships. There's one for judo. And this guy had won it a couple of times, a guy from San Jose State. And I fought him in the open division. And I don't know if I ever actually got a hold of him. I've never been dominated with my grips off the go like that in my life. Never before, never since. And he ended up, just breezing through me and executing a nice little throw on me. And I just like, okay, well, I don't even know if he knew I was on the mat with him. He just beat the brakes off me. It was bad. But in my weight class, I ran into the other half of the draw. Ran into the guy from the Olympic Training Center. We had a good match going. I was down by a couple, by a minor score, and I knew that time was running out, and I needed to go all out on him. And I went for a big throw. He countered me, and boom, I was done. Ended up taking fourth on that one. But you get to that level, and you run into those guys that are of that technical proficiency, that have been doing this for 10 years, that have been drilling, that have been just really honing the fine edge. And that's where you realize that you hit a ceiling. The year after college in '98, I fought in the senior nationals, and around that time, they had changed the top weight class. It used to be 209 and under, and then everything 210 and above is heavyweight, is open division, right? They changed that so that the top weight class went up to 220, and I was floating around about 235 at the time. And most of the guys that were my size, they got the heck under that 220 mark. I did not. And so I'm out there fighting against 350-pound guys that also are more technically proficient than me. And it was like a boy fighting against men. And that was the beginning of my retirement, of realizing that, I've gone through all this. I've done all this. I've had some stuff going on in my personal life. I'm trying to get my career going out of college now. I'm spending a lot of time teaching. I'm not spending enough time training for myself. It's probably time to step down from competitive judo. And so within that next year, I think I was done competing.
It's something that Vitor talked about a little bit, as far as the challenges of balancing being a competitor and also coaching. And actually, Robin touched on it too. And when he was talking about in his competing days, he had opened this jiu-jitsu gym, and he was teaching things that he was interested in getting better at, rather than teaching the lessons that the students needed. So there's a theme that's kind of running through multiple conversations now, as far as those kinds of challenges of balancing those two things.
You'd think I would have learned that lesson back then, but when I started training with Team Chitwood and started training BJJ, gosh, it was only like 2 years in before I started teaching a Saturday judo class. Because I thought, I have this knowledge. There's nobody, he's got his hands full. He's busy. His brother Neil has a brown belt in judo. Craig doesn't have any rank in judo, but he's really good with stand up as well. You got guys here that could teach throwing, but they're all busy, and I've got some time. Maybe I can throw together a Saturday class. And so we started doing that, and then we moved to our new facility with multiple mat spaces. I started actually teaching 2 days a week. The challenge was it was taking away from my jiu-jitsu time and energy and focus. And I got into some time period there where it's like, okay, judo's tough. It's tough to keep numbers up. It's hard on the body to train as well as to teach. And I'd go to tournaments on weekends and take one student with me.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I'd take a different student with me. And it's, as much as I love it, as much as the students loved it, it was not real. The juice wasn't really worth the squeeze. And my job kind of stepped up, and more responsibilities came at me in my corporate position. And so I decided that I needed to step away from that. And Sean was really understanding and supportive. And whenever I have a chance to teach some throws, he always leans to me and has me jump in there and help out and do what I can to work with our people on our stand-up game.
Yeah,
But yeah, for a long while there, it was really holding my jiu-jitsu growth back.
I know I've been in your ear a couple of times about some of the stand up and throws. And if we're rolling live, there's been a couple of times I've stood up and then you stand up with me, and I go, oh no, that's the only time I pull guard is if it's Greg Frangos that's got to hold me.
Amazing how fast somebody's butt can hit the ground when they just accidentally stood up with a judo black belt.
I've stood up
It's
with you a couple of times, but yeah, typically I know I'm not probably winning that fight.
yeah, it's fun though. It's a good learning process, and the thing is, like, even when I was teaching judo, I I wouldn't necessarily uncork a real killer of a throw against somebody unless they were at a level where I knew they could take the fall. And
Mm-hmm.
so, today if we're doing any kind of stand up technique, I'm doing really gentle, ugly, high percentage, low impact throws because I'm not trying to hit you with the planet. I'm just trying to get you down and get into an advantageous position. And there's lots of ways to do that without having to have a massive throw that looks great on film and makes a crater when you land. Those are nice. Those are fun, but the simple knockdown throws where you can maneuver into an advantageous position instead of landing up in their guard, those are the ones that I really love to work on, and those usually don't end up in injury.
Well,
Usually,
I appreciate it. So you coached high school lacrosse as well for a decade. How did that translate not just to martial arts, but you've had a successful business career in business. You know, can you tie kind of those things together?
boy, I for a long time I had been searching. I had been searching for a better path, and I love these as far as athletically. These are my two major loves in life between these two sports. And when I stepped away from judo, I immediately went and started playing club lacrosse with some guys, and then I transitioned that into coaching. Um, Coaching is tough. Being especially let's see, 5 of those years were as a head coach between Westerville North and Olentangy. And when you're the head coach of a high school sports team, it's a full-time job. I also was working full time in as a project manager in telecommunications, and I was going to school full time getting my teaching license because at some point I realized I can't keep doing this forever. I have to move one way or the other, and why not move in the direction of the things I love and get my teaching license so I can teach and coach and have a little more of a dovetailing of my interests and my time. Um, by the time I got done with my teaching license, I decided that was not the direction I wanted to be, and that's when I stepped away from coaching. But I'll tell you one thing about coaching, um, and you hear this a lot in jiu-jitsu with, blue belt professors, giving a lecture, blah, blah, blah. My judo coach, not a great person, but he was an amazing coach. He, um, as soon as we got our yellow belts, we're talking equivalent to a one stripe in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. As soon as we got our yellow belts, okay, now start teaching the white belts. He taught us to teach at a very early age. And what the saying is, if you hear something, you understand it. If you do it, you know it. If you teach it, you master it. Because you have to be prepared for somebody to ask you really dumb questions and sometimes really intelligent questions. And if you don't know the material inside and out, you have to go find that answer for them. That's your responsibility as a coach at whatever level you're coaching. And so I learned very early on to become a student of the game because of teaching it, both in as a yellow belt in judo, and then a few years later coaching lacrosse. Well, actually before that, even teaching judo as a brown and black belt, and then transitioning that into coaching high school lacrosse. I was a pretty well polished teacher by the time I started coaching lacrosse, and you know that got pretty good. I got a lot of experience through over the years with that. Um, and so when it came to then once again teaching judo and occasionally teaching jujitsu now, I feel very comfortable. I've learned through a lot of good experiences and bad experiences how to reach people and how to articulate things, and I I can see what they're seeing from the other side because I've been a student of the game for so long and I've taught in so many different ways. It's um, coaching is not simply regurgitating what you've learned. It's really understanding where your students are at and being able to make the connection between your level of knowledge and their level of knowledge, which is usually a lot lower than yours. And if you can build that bridge and make that connection, then you can get the job done.
That's awesome. I like how you approach that. Do you have a specific coaching moment that sticks out to you?
Oh boy, the moments, only bad ones. Gosh, I actually got thrown out of a game coaching against my alma mater one time. That was embarrassing, but the rest were big bears around that one. To me, coaching, the good parts about coaching are not moments; they're relationships. I was chatting a few weeks ago with a buddy of mine that was the head coach at Olentangy when I was the JV coach, and we were just catching up and just talking about not only the good times we had as a coaching staff, but what some of our old players are up to. And it's amazing to see so many young men that we've been involved with, thousands over the years of young men that we've been involved with that are now dads and are now husbands and are now um, you know, some of them have very average, awesome careers. Some of them are doing extraordinary things. It's wonderful to see that growth and to know that at some level you were a part of that. That's a good feeling. That's really the highlight of coaching. It's I can't really think of a moment on the positive side that really can compare to those kind of investments that you make and what you get to see from.
I like that. I still remember, every high school coach I had and, some of the club coaches as well. And I've coached football at, from Pee Wee in middle school. Obviously I've had a couple of years at OSU, and I always hope that people that I've coached in some capacity, they have those same kinds of fond memories of maybe something that I've also passed on to them.
Now, I will throw one in there just because you're a Marine and I like to dig at Marines. I had one kid that graduated from Olentangy and joined the Marine Corps, and he did some combatives training, and he came back and we were palling around after practice one day, and he wanted to test his combatives training against me, and at this point I hadn't trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it was just my judo skills, and I don't know, I tapped him in about 7 seconds or something like that.
It's
That's not bad. Go back to work.
Yeah, MCMAP and which MCMAP is the Marine Corps Martial Arts Program, if you're unfamiliar. Not you, Greg. I know you know what it is, but a lot of times, you'll train enough to get belted in MCMAP when you're in the Marine Corps, but you're not training it with any kind of regularity and becoming actually proficient. So I do kind of grin a little bit when a Marine comes to jiu-jitsu with his MCMAP experience as what he wants to tell me his resume is. And I would say like a black belt in MCMAP is probably like a 3 to 4 stripe white belt in jiu-jitsu, maybe a blue belt, if they were actually like teaching and very active in MCMAP. But yeah, I enjoy it when, the combatives guys or the MCMAP guys that are coming out of service come and want to give it a run.
Good. It's good to test yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and it's good to, as long as you do something good with that humbling experience.
Yeah, it's a what they come in with a lot more than the guy off the street who never did any of it. So, so you got your black belt earlier this year, and I was transitioning from one gym to another, and I stayed long enough to make sure that I could see you get your black belt. And your black belt, a lot of guys get their black belts, and there's nothing wrong with this, but a lot of them, they get their black belts, they're like, thanks everybody, good night. That's it. And they don't have a lot to say, whether it's
I love those guys because we do this in Team Two. We do this at a pressure test where we're rolling for 2.5, 3 hours, and we're all sitting in our puddles of sweat, exhausted, and everything hurts. I like those guys because I like getting out of there and getting home.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you sit there and you get stiff, and you're like, oh man, like I'm in pain. I just need water.
I was not that
Yeah,
guy.
and you took the opposite approach. It was one of the longer speeches, but there was substance in the speech. Um, that's the difference. It wasn't a thing where you were just rambling. You had a message that very clearly you had put a lot of thought into it, and so if you could kind of rehash some of it, um, and some of the key points, I think that I could. I wish I had the recording. I'm sure I could get the recording, but yeah, go ahead and share.
Yeah. Well, and just the background, I started thinking about it when I got my brown belt. So, like 4 years of brown belt, I had plenty of time to think about it. It's one of those things where you kind of run it through your head in the shower. This is a result of 4 years of shower thoughts. Because what did I want to, what did I want to share? So many of the black belts that have come through our team before that, uh, there's, gosh, almost 30 of them now. And there was one when I started training there 14 years ago. But when they came through, they all gave such wonderful advice. Yeah, there were a few, thank you, good night. But a lot of them were just like, hey, here's what worked for me. Here's my advice. Here's what you should do, to keep your jujitsu journey going and keep it healthy and, blah, blah, blah. Um, I thought, I don't really like giving advice. Not, no offense to those that did. I loved it. But for me, it just, I don't know. I wanted to do something a little different. And I thought, well, what's the best advice I've ever received? And I thought, and I mulled these over and thought about what I could say about each one. And I realized that, in 5 decades on this earth, I've received 5 really great pieces of advice, and they're almost evenly spaced, one per decade. And so instead of giving my advice, I'm really just plagiarizing the advice that's been given to me by others. The first piece of advice was from my father when I was very young. My dad was always a hardworking man, always, providing for the family. But, he's one of those guys that didn't sit idly at home. He was always around the house working, doing things, and sometimes he'd be out training for marathon running, and I did not get that gene. He was really always deliberate about making sure that when he was doing any kind of home improvement project, anything around the house, that I was involved. And a lot of dads use the whole excuse of hold the flashlight for me, but he was just like, no, I want you to come and watch and learn. Watch what I'm doing, see how this works, so someday you can do this too. And it was amazing how many home improvement skills I picked up just by being there with them and just by watching and learning. But the lesson there is huge in that, you can measure intelligence a few different ways. You can measure it in raw cognitive ability, creativity, etc. But to me, one of the best behavioral attributes that leads to intelligence and that works well with strong cognitive skills is innate curiosity. If you pay attention to the world around you as it's happening and try and understand how things are working, why are people doing what they're doing? What's motivation behind this? How does that piece of machinery work? You can figure out a whole lot about the world. And with jujitsu, there is no shortage of opportunities to learn. You're sitting on the edge of the mat and you're watching somebody roll. That's your teacher for that moment. They are teaching a lesson. Whether they're doing something good or doing something bad, it's an opportunity to learn. And it may be something that you already know. Like, I know exactly what's about to happen next. Yep, it happened. But that confirmation is its own lesson, that your assessment of the situation is on the mark. Yeah, I mentioned my judo instructor was not a good person. I mean, to be quite honest, I have strong reasons to suspect that he was a predator, especially to young girls. We've seen that, in the martial arts community and elsewhere. I trained with and fought against Kayla Harrison's coach, the one that sexually abused her. And, that breaks my heart, but it also shows a matter of pride of seeing her grow up and come through that adversity. I used to see her when she was like 8 years old, just curb stomping kids on the judo mats. It was great. And to see her grow into the woman and the champion that she is, going through all that adversity is just such an inspiration. That's a teacher right there. That's somebody that is giving the opportunity to show the right way to do things. And those instructors that were abusive and not good people, they provided you just an equally valuable lesson of what you do not want to be and what you do not want to tolerate being around. So, that lesson of watch and learn and pay attention and be a student of the world was ingrained in me at a very early age by my dad. The second piece of advice was in my teenage years. My family went water skiing with some family friends, and before I went out this is the first time I ever been water skiing, and before I go out there, my mom, who's a total smartass like me, she gives me this motherly advice. She said, "When you start to drink lake, let go." Check. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's very practical advice. But what I didn't understand until a few years ago, going through some of the toughest times in my life a few years ago, and with my last marriage, um, it really taught me. I finally understood the value of that advice. In that, when there are things that once served you that no longer do serve you, you have to let them go. And think about that in terms of jujitsu. Yeah, you get what we call in the military is front sight fixation or target fixation, where like I want that armbar, that arm stick. I got to get that armbar. And in the hunt for that armbar, you may choke, you may miss the positional improvement, you may miss the wrist lock. My favorite. You miss all these opportunities because your view's still myopic. So you had this idea, this attachment to something that you really wanted, and you held on to it long enough for it to drag you to the bottom and drown you. And learning to let go of those things that no longer serve you is such a huge lesson that I learned very late in life. And the tuition on that was high, but I'm glad I learned that lesson, and it was wonderful advice.
If,
Yeah, go ahead.
and I don't want to throw things up, but on your first point, coaches who we already talked about what a special thing it is to be a coach. Coaches who betray the trust of the people that they're coaching. I will never understand it because there's so much reward already in coaching, and unfortunately, it happens at the highest levels. I mean, we had the big scandal, obviously, with the doctor at OSU and our wrestling team. We had Penn State and their, the Sandusky trial or the Sandusky, scandal and not just that it happened in the first place, but also the enablement and cover-ups that seem to have happened in a couple of these places. It is the most despicable form of betrayal of trust that I think it's worse than adultery. It's worse than anything.
Or at least consenting adult that's participating in that.
Bingo.
Yeah. This didn't make the list, but as honorable mention of my top 5 pieces of advice, my dad always told me that if you really want to be excellent as an athlete, you have to give yourself to your coach. You have to put your life, put your well-being, put your energy into their control. And there's a ridiculous amount of trust that comes with that. And that trust being betrayed, it can be just absolutely devastating.
It's like an unconditional trust, and sometimes what happens is that unconditional trust is violated. And I'm glad we haven't seen as many cases of it in, at least the jiu-jitsu community. I'm sure it happens. But thankfully I haven't been around it. You alluded a couple of times that your judo coach was not a good person. And I hope that if it was related to those kinds of things, I hope they got caught and paid the piper.
He's passed away years ago, and no, to the best of my knowledge, nobody ever came forth and pressed charges. Different time, different environment, and the struggle of the he said she said battle is not worth fighting to a lot of victims. And so, sadly, whatever afterlife he faces will have to be the only judge that he faces on that. But it's again, these things can cost you. Kayla Harrison talked about how she didn't want to live after all that came out, and she admitted to her mom what had been happening and just the fallout from that. And the Pedros, Jimmy and Big Jim out in Massachusetts, they literally saved her life through
Good.
healthy coaching, through the appropriate kind of love, and through a focus on the sport that was the conduit of her betrayal, but was also the conduit of her salvation. And that is the beauty of what we do is you can learn those good lessons and you can learn those bad lessons. And if you can survive the bad lessons, you know, you don't have to leave doing what you love. You can find a place, find a way, find the right relationship to rebuild and continue on with your passion, and use it as a healing process. And
Yeah.
we can talk later. I've talked about spending a whole segment talking about mental health, and through some of my own challenges and struggles, jujitsu has been one of my sanctuaries. That's been one of the things that has um, kept me alive, and I owe a lot to it. So we'll dive
Yeah.
into that at another time. But yeah, it's I'm very protective of the shield, right? My role as a brown belt mat enforcer, and again, I was brown belt for 4 years. So I had plenty of experience enforcing. My role also sometimes extended to people's behavior. I had a conversation with one person that I don't want to go into the details, but you know, there was pictures of them from social media wearing our logo, and some questions about whether they were acting with integrity. And I sat them down. I said, hey, my your personal life is not my business. Whatever floats your boat, as long as it doesn't sink mine. But if you're wearing that in a a social media profile pic, and people are sharing that pic and saying, hey, not sure about this person acting in the right way, that reflects on me. And I don't want my integrity questioned like that. I've been around that kind of thing. I've been around way worse than that, obviously. But I don't want to be a part of that. And so please keep in mind that you are carrying the reputation of all of us when you are out in public. This person, explained the situation. It was innocent. And he was very respectful of how I approached him, and the fact I did approach him, and so making sure that the integrity of our organization is solid. Not
Yeah.
that I want him to cover anything up. I want him to act with integrity when he's out there representing us. That's
Sure.
the big lesson.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that if you put your Jim's bumper sticker on your car and you're out there road raging on people, that's um so it's a good thing to keep in mind that anytime you're quote unquote representing the brand, that's a big part of even the social media that I have. I stay out of politics. Um, this podcast will never be political, and I'm not going to be out there spreading negativity that seems to be so inherent on social media and the internet.
Not
I'm not
negativity.
going to get
It's
into it.
divisive. It's
Sure.
divisiveness. Why be divisive? We've got something that we love to share together, which is jujitsu and all the lessons that we've learned from it.
Well,
We've got such a unifying force there.
I'd also
Yeah.
get into the gatekeeping and well, the gatekeeping is a big one. I want more people to find jujitsu. That's why I put the energy that I put into the Weedify Foundation, is because I know what jujitsu has done for me. And, even though I was never a Weedify athlete, I never took the benefit, but I know what that benefit is. And I want people to find jujitsu. And if I'm out there acting like a raging asshole all the time, people, they don't want to be like me. Right. So, I need to keep that in mind anytime I've, you know, got a brand, whether it's my gym or otherwise.
If you love something, be a good ambassador for it at
Amen.
all times.
Amen.
Yeah.
All right. So letting go. I think we all, oh, well, okay. So letting go. I remember one time, Greg, you took my lapel and you said, that's mine now. And, I've told this story a million times because nobody's ever done that to me like that before. You grabbed my lapel, and for that 5-minute round, you did not let that lapel go. I couldn't break the grip off. It was maddening. You took me all over the place, and I never got rid of that
You know what?
lapel. But
I almost risked. you don't know, I almost wrist locked myself like 3 times during that roll,
Good.
but I wanted to prove a point.
Good.
It was just for fun. It
Yeah.
was tactically stupid,
Yeah.
but I also wanted to give you something else to think about rather than
Sure.
everything else I was doing. Because you're a big
Yeah.
guy, and I get in the wrong spot with you, and I'm fighting out from underneath a mammoth.
Yeah. Yeah, that's mine now. But sometimes it is good to let go, like if you're going to wrist lock yourself. I think that sometimes we do hang on to things that are no longer serving our best interests. And, um, I think an example for me lately is uh, I am not 25 or even 35 anymore. I'm 45. And I'm training with a lot of guys that are in their 20s. And some of them are really athletic and strong and they recover well. And I'm just not that. And I've had to alter kind of how I do it and admit to myself, as hard as it is as a man to say, I am not what I once was, as age is hitting. I'm having to let go of some ego there. Uh, and if the young guy gets me, then it gets me. So
Yeah, you can become attached to people, you can become attached to things, you can become attached to ideals that you thought should be, right? I should be able to squat this much. I should be able to roll for 30 minutes without taking a break at this pace, right? You become attached to those things and they can be detrimental. One of the biggest things that has changed my approach to jujitsu getting older was something that Helson had said and Sean had repeated to us, and then I later ran saw Helson at one of the local clinics, and he repeated this, talking about how at age 70 he was outside of a bar and a fight rolled up into him and into his car. Now that's probably the sanitized story. Helson, you never know. He likes to have fun, but um, ended up getting caught up in the scrap and getting knocked to the ground and got his knee banged up. And by reports, he ended up choking the guy out, but because he's Helson. But survivability of the fight
mhm.
became a very real thing for him. And I'm 51. The days of my body getting that much better, I can get stronger, but the joints don't necessarily repair themselves at this age. The recovery time does not it's not what it was. The flexibility is, you can work on those things, but it's such an uphill battle at this point. And I know it's going to get worse. So learning to set your expectations for what a new version, a new definition of victory and surviving the fight is something that is I've been thinking about a lot for the last couple of years since Sean and Helson were talking about that. And it's like, oh, it makes sense for an older martial artist.
Yeah. So I know. So I drove Helson from Columbus down to Athens a couple of years back, and he told me about that fight, and he showed me the big. His knee is not the same as it used to be. He's got like kind of like a big like knot, that is now a permanent fixture on his lower appendage, his knee. Um, uh, yeah, survive so that you can roll the next day. Yeah,
And when it comes to life in general, that lesson about letting go of those things, we face survival, victims of trauma. Again, we'll get into that deeper later, but victims of trauma in one way or another are all working to try and let go of that experience, those feelings, the behaviors that come from that trauma. We struggle to let go of those things so that we can move forward, because they will literally drag you down and drown.
yeah. I've had my own battles with some post traumatic stress and relational problems that are probably part result of that stress. Where uh I don't think you necessarily have to hit rock bottom per se, but I did. And there's a point that you get to where you have to make a decision that, like, you know, are you just going to wither up and die? Or are you going to go ahead and stand back up? And you can look at examples, like if you had, maybe poor examples of, in my case, I had a biological father that wasn't involved in my life. growing up, and um, he spent a lot of time in prison, and I even had I had teachers tell me that I wasn't going to amount to anything, and a lot of it, I was thinking, well, I'm the son of whatever I'm the son of, and um, but eventually you make a decision. I can either be exactly like that, or I can be nothing like that, and it's still my choice. And I hate the term "the apple doesn't fall far from the tree" because um, you can choose not to fall next to the tree. You can forge your own path, and you can go do whatever it is you want to do. You just have to go for it. And that includes when you're struggling with things, you just have to make a decision to, and I shouldn't say just have to. I mean, obviously there's a process. It's not a switch. You have to, it's going to require work, but you can make a decision to do the work to um, work on your mental health and get healthier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So your point 3, black belt.
Yeah. So point 3, as I was, I left a little bit out of the timeline. After my junior year of college, I wasn't doing too great in school, and I joined the Air National Guard. So needed to pay for school myself the rest of the way, and needed some help doing it. So joined the military. This was back in '95, and one of my good high school buddies had gone to boot camp a couple of years before me, and he gave me some great advice before I left. He said, wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, don't ever stop taking it all in. Don't stop being amazed at where you are and what you're doing and what you're accomplishing. Because the minute you do, it's gonna suck. And that is so true for military training. Especially if you've never grown up in that environment and all of a sudden you're in boot camp. I don't care whether it's Air Force boot camp, Marine Corps boot camp, even Coast Guard, whatever. It's stressful. They have orchestrated this whole game to put you under stress and create an isolation of who you were before and who you're going to be now, and it's very deliberate. And yet, the things that you get to experience and the things you get to see, and if you can step back and detach a little bit and see the game for what it is, it's a masterpiece. It's lovely, and it's you're never going to get to do this ever again in your life. you know the thing with training jiu-jitsu is it's hard. Judo is really hard on the body, don't get me wrong. It just destroys your body. It's rough. It's amazing, but it's rough. And jiu-jitsu is something you can keep doing for many years, but it's tough. It's hard work. It's unforgiving. It is, in the short term, sometimes very unrewarding, especially when you're the nail instead of the hammer, on those nights, weeks, months, or even years. It's brutal, and you're dealing with nonstop adversity. But if you focus on that, you're not going to last. You're going to bail out. Even if you get your blue belt, you're gonna have the blue belt blues and get on out of there. You're not going to be in it for the long haul. But if you appreciate the journey that you're on, and if you see that, wow, I could really kick the crap out of the guy that walked in here a few years ago, and you can see that journey. You can see and appreciate when you get caught with a submission. You can see your teammates getting better around you through beating the crap out of you, or maybe you beating the crap out of them. You can see that growth if you just detach a little bit and step back and really observe what's happening. And it's such a rewarding journey. And it's think about, the BJJ has become a lot more popular, but we're still in a very small percentage of people in the world that actually get to train the sport. And of those of us that have achieved upper ranks, a much smaller percentage of that group. And so, the ride has been amazing, and I've made so many friendships. I've, um, built all these relationships, and I've learned so much about myself along the way. But you can't do that if you're mired in the suck.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, Helson
So I
and Robin actually shared the anecdote about when you're in that suck that you can't escape out of. Helson said, and Robin has passed it. Learn to love it, and learn to love it. Even when you're getting destroyed, just learn to love it in the knowledge that number one, you're surviving. right? It's uncomfortable, but you're surviving, which means you're not dying. And when you can embrace that piece of the suck and you can learn to love it, all the other benefits will come. Because you're right, 10% of people that start jujitsu get to a blue belt, and then 10% that get to blue belt actually ever make it to black belt is kind of the round statistic that I see if you go onto the Google machine. You have to find ways to step back, take it in, and appreciate what's going on, not just in your own growth, but what's going on around you and your training partners and how they're growing.
The same applies for your career, your family. I mean, having young kids is tough. Oh, and I got teenagers right now. Luckily, they're pretty squared away and they're great kids. So I don't have a whole lot of teenage girl drama. But I imagine that once they leave the nest and they're out on their own and worrying about them and hoping that they do well and find the right things in life, that's going to be probably the even tougher than the current age. But it's tough parenting. Gosh, if you just step back and look at it, it's a beautiful truth.
Well, you don't get that time back. I am an empty nester now, and um, I and maybe it's just because the oldest was born so long ago that you kind of lose the concept of how much your life changes right then. Um, I'd also say that the time that my son Ian was born was right after I came back from Iraq, and so my life was already and getting out of the Marine Corps, like it all happened at one time. So it's possible that maybe I don't have a concept for how dramatic that change was because everything else in my life was changing at that point. But when Miles left to head off to college, boy, that's a big change. I mean, it's actually one of the reasons that I train in the morning, is because if I'm not here, my wife is home by herself. It's just her and the dogs, and I'm doing jujitsu, and um, so I train in the morning now. Even though it drives her nuts sometimes that my alarm's going off at 4:45 so that I can get there. Um, I'm doing it by and large so that my empty nest wife has company in the evening. Um, so yeah, sorry to derail, but
No,
uh,
no, it's all good. All right, item number
so
4.
prepare yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. All right, item number 4. Later mid-career, several years back, I was working in moved into software as a project manager, and I'd just been kind of plateaued in my career for a lot of years. And he at our company was in town, and I pulled him aside and I said, "Hey, what do I do to get to the next level? Like, how do I do it? I can't seem to move past this. I had been in a management role, but never managed people. I'd never been given direct reports, and I couldn't. Nobody wanted to do that unless you had actually done it before. It's a hard barrier to cross in the corporate world of getting to where you're a leader of people. I just asked him, how do I get to the next level? And this guy, he was very direct and kind of gave me a little bit of flippant advice, but it was magical. He said, "Be awesome at your current job." Right? Well, thanks.
Yeah,
But it's not that I packed it away for years. I immediately walked away and started thinking about that and said, okay, that's legit. That's a legit call to action. And I did. I focused on that in my career. I focused on being awesome at my job, and it was like a year later where I was promoted into a management position, and 2 years later where I was promoted over senior director to director. I spent the last 6 years at that company as a director of engineering, um, with a lot of responsibility and a lot of special projects, and it was a phenomenal time of growth and um, accolades and all the things come with it. But it wouldn't have happened unless I was awesome at that first level, and then the next one wouldn't happen if I was awesome at that level. It really gave me the laser focus to be mindful of where I'm at, what I'm doing, and to not be so focused on the future. And maybe it goes back to the judo conversation where my coach taught us to, hey, you're not gonna make up for the 10 years that this other guy's been training, but you're going to do these things to try and shortcut it. You're going to try and get to that level as quickly as possible. And while it was good for a short term, it may have been the worst career advice I've ever received, because when I got into the business world, I started really looking right away at how can I advance? How can I advance? How can I advance? And I oftentimes did not develop a strong base in a certain area, whether it be in telecommunications or in software. I didn't develop that strong base. I never was fully grounded before I was looking for the next thing and taking every opportunity to get to the next level. And it's kind of like, you know, trying to as a two-stripe white belt, trying to do every fancy move you see on YouTube in jiu-jitsu. It's a horrible idea. Like, yeah, have fun a little bit for 1%, maybe 2% of your time, but the other 98% of your time, you better be focusing on your fundamentals. You have to develop that base. And whatever level you're at, you have to focus on what you need to do to be good at that level. When you're a white belt, you should be struggling, just working on surviving, working on accepting that misery, that suck fest that happens when you're just getting smashed and you're getting toolboxed and people are toying with you and they're rolling with you and submitting you while they're carrying on a conversation with somebody else on the mat, a little silly stuff like that. You know, just deal with that and learn to accept it, learn to love it, that position and that misery. But also start to understand a little more about what the game is involving and what the growth opportunities are from that game. That's really what you do at a white belt level, is just to really build that strong foundation. And so much of Vitor said this, like, you know, like that you're once as a competitor at that low rank level, you've developed a lot of your game. If you're really pushing yourself and you're competing all the time, your game is developed very early on in the belt structure. And I totally agree with that. And if it's based in competition, you're going to be a good competitor, but you're going to be missing out on some of the fundamentals that make you a strong, rounded jiu-jitsu player, including with self-defense and including the ability to teach it one day. So having that firm foundation of white belt is huge. At blue belt, you know, first of all, practice not quitting. But you know, the most important thing for blue belts I can recommend is be awesome at not being the world champion of practice. Learning how to relax your game enough to hear the conversation. I had this talk with a few blue belts over the years that um, jiu-jitsu is a conversation. Imagine you and I have a conversation. We're both screaming at the top of our lungs. I can't hear what you're saying. You can't hear what I'm saying. You know, we're both trying to get our point across, but we're not in any way having a conversation. And guys that come in there and they're tense and they're dynamic and they're explosive and, you know, former wrestlers are they're trained to be this way. So they're some of the worst culprits on that, but they're just all aggression. They have no idea what their opponent is doing. And so they're not hearing half the conversation, which means that I'm outmaneuvering them while they're being all aggressive. I'm listening to them, but I'm also getting my own words in there, and I'm going to outmaneuver them every time. Um, so learning to relax a little bit and be less concerned about winning every role and being more geared towards learning every role is huge for the blue belt level. You know, at purple belt, that's where you're starting to develop your game. And for most of us, you know, at the recreational level and even the passive competitor level, you're really starting to understand the nuances of the game. You're starting to set aside what isn't working for you. You know, I'm barrel shaped and I've got short arms, so I know arm triangles are never going to be my thing because I just can't reach, right? Set those things aside. I focus on the things that I can be good on, but also open myself up to other things that I haven't learned yet and start to really see the full picture of the game. You know, brown belt is you're learning to patch the holes in your game at that point to get ready for black. You're learning to teach if you haven't learned it by now. You're learning to be able to articulate nuance to a lower rank as you're helping them learn. Whether you're at the head of the class or whether you're just rolling with somebody and helping them, you know, you become a very important part of the academy as an instructor, as a brown belt, and that's really solidifying what you need to be to get to that next level. And I'm just now learning what, you know, I still have a lot to learn. I just got my black belt in April. I have yet to learn what it is to be awesome at this level. That's the beginning of my journey now, and I'm looking forward to, you know, years from now being able to actually speak with authority on that. But we'll see. But you know, like I said, every level, wherever you're at, you be awesome at that. The next level will come. Don't be so focused on what comes next if you're not really solid on what you're doing right now.
I like it. It's that's good advice. And you know, if I think one of the reasons that blue belts quit is that they're trying to look at the next level, the next level, the next level, and that's a long way away from where they're at. They need to,
Big mountain to climb.
yeah,
Yeah.
they got to get good at where they're at and, be a great blue belt.
Well, Sean Chitwood and I were doing judo at the same time. He started jiu-jitsu not long after that. He's a 5th degree black belt right now. I am not looking at him and saying, how do I get to that level? I can't get that time
I don't
past
think that,
that
I don't
time
think
back.
that's how the black belt works.
No, like I can't get the years back that I was off doing lacrosse and not doing jiu-jitsu when he was doing jiu-jitsu all that time. I'm not going to try and measure myself against that. I'm not going to look at that mountain to climb. I'm going to look at my own journey, my own timeline, my own interests, and make sure that wherever I'm at, that's where my energy is spent, and then I'm focused on what I need to be doing at that time for me, and be the best version of myself.
Well, and I think that understanding that and taking care of understanding that everybody's path is going to be different. I talked to guys that I was in the Marine Corps with, a couple of them, they stayed in for 20 years and they're like, do you regret getting out? Well, no, I don't regret getting out. I loved my time in the Marine Corps. And it sucked, in a lot of ways, but you embrace the suck. But I'm also glad that I got out, because had I not, I would not have had these other great experiences that I've had. I wouldn't have my time at Ohio State. I wouldn't have, probably gotten into software, into my current role, because, I'd just be coming out of the suck. So, as it relates to jiu-jitsu, don't worry about if somebody is getting ahead of you or they're already ahead and you're not going to catch them. That's fine. Just enjoy, the experience that you do have and set goals for yourself.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. And honestly, the be awesome at your current job is good advice for me personally, just because I've been in my current role for, it'll be 6 years at the end of the year, where I'm like, how do I get to that next thing? And I have a little bit of that, that antsiness that, I want to keep moving and try new things. And, but I just need to be good here first. So,
Yeah, sometimes it takes a little shift here, a little shift there. Maybe moving to a new company is the thing that people do. But, you're whether you move outside of your organization or you move up within it, none of that's going to happen unless you are grounded in where you're supposed to be, and say, hey, yeah, I've been doing this role for a while.
yeah.
Not being arrogant about it, not being overconfident about it, but saying, yeah, I've seen this, I've seen that, I've seen that, I've been there, done that. I'm looking for more challenges. I'm looking for more growth, because I'm really able to do my job without any kind of strain. And that's the sign where you know that you're ready to advance. Like I said, it doesn't mean you don't pursue those things, but don't pursue them at the expense of where you're currently out of your current.
Okay. So, black belt Greg
Number
Frangos.
five.
Yeah.
Number five. So I attributed this one to my ex-wife, kind of tongue in cheek. Um, I was married to my ex-wife most of my jiu-jitsu journey, and I'd joke about how she would always tell me to go to class. You should go to class. Why don't you just go to class? And really, she just wanted to get rid of me for a couple hours. But this advice comes from many places. Your coach will tell you to go to class. A lot of people will tell you, your buddies will tell you, get back out there and get to class. And it's all about showing up. It's all about showing up to where you need to be and getting the work done. Thoughts and prayers are, not to knock that. It's a wonderful thing. It's good that we are human and that we emote and that we empathize with others and that we want things. It's good to desire, but you have to make those things happen. You cannot have goals that you're not willing to execute upon and that you're not willing to sacrifice for. You have to actually get out there and take action at some point. And going to class, showing up and being there to do the hard work is such an essential part of everything. Um, I've experienced that in my my work. I've experienced it in jiu-jitsu. You know, you're not going to get better unless you get in there and embrace the suck and go through those things. And that's where all those other lessons kind of wrap up is you have to be there in order to make that change. It's a magical change that can transform you that and affect others around you when you show up to whatever it is that's important. You know, since I got my black belt, I've been well, actually, you know, jump into this is that what I've been doing since then. 4 days after I got my black belt, I closed on a deal to purchase a company, the RB Powers company, and this is a company with a long storied history, and this is my first time being a small business owner. Um, you know, I have not been doing my job of showing up to jujitsu classes much since I got my black belt because this is where my focus needs to be on building and rebuilding this company that has a long history but has a lot of growth opportunity and building my place in it. And so, and as well as a couple months after my promotion, about 6 weeks later, I got married, to my lovely wife Jennifer, and it's just building our family together, building this business. She's an amazing coach to have in my corner, and so I show up every day and I execute on the things that are the most important for me to do right now. And it's been an amazing ride. I fell in love with the idea of getting involved with manufacturing a few years ago. I was listening to a Jocko podcast. I think it was episode number 93 when the first time he had Pete Roberts on. And if you've never listened to that, it's an amazing episode worth a listen. Pete is the founder of Origin. And at the time, they didn't have a business relationship, and Jocko became partners with him after their meeting, their conversation. And just an amazing story about the state of American manufacturing, particularly in the garment industry, and what he had to do to build a factory and to build a business that manufactures from soup to nuts in the United States.
Yeah.
And you know, I've heard people say, economists say that, well, this is part of a natural evolution. You go from an agrarian society to a manufacturing and industrial society to a service-based society, and that we should not be trying to keep American manufacturing going or try and bring it back or anything. We have evolved past that, and we should embrace that evolution. And that's great, except for a couple of things like strategic purposes. Like if we went to war tomorrow with China, we would not have the chemical companies that make the primers to go in ammunition enough to keep our people fighting, let alone be able to put clothes on them. Because the garment manufacturing in the U.S. is so it has been outsourced so
Right.
much. Little things like that, but it's also the fact that people like to have the sense of accomplishment of building something, of making something with their hands, and so I fell in love with that idea, and my job in software ended back in January, and I knew about this place through at the time my fiance, now my wife, um, and I thought, why not? Why not give it a try? I had, as a coach, as a lacrosse coach years ago, when I was going to school full time, working full time, and coaching full time, I never felt I could get enough done. I had horrible boundaries, and I was so stressed out all the time because I never felt there were enough hours in the day to do what needed to be done. And I feel confident that I've grown enough, I've been through enough and found enough mental health along the way that I feel my boundaries are much better now, and that what I swore a year or two ago I would never do, which is own a small business, I'm now doing it. And so far I'm working my butt off, but I know that there are healthy boundaries that I can maintain and that I can manage that balance between work and doing things that provide my mental and physical health, such as, you know, getting to the gym, getting to the academy, time with the family, time with my wife. So I'm in. It's a still early on, and I'm on this adventure, but um, that's the next phase of showing up is being here, leading this company, leading my team of employees in a small town of Ashley, Ohio, and carrying on this amazing manufacturing tradition that we have in the U.S. and seeing what I can do to help revitalize it.
That's outstanding. That's, uh, you know, it has to be incredibly rewarding, not just from the idea that you're making something, But you're also, you have these people that are relying on you for their livelihood to grow and make that business stronger so that they can keep food on their plates as well. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of, responsibility, but the reward on the other end of that, if you can execute, is tremendous.
Yeah. And it's not just about providing them a livelihood. It's also about providing them a sense of purpose of that they get to make something with their hands. They get to see this. As
I
soon as we get
agree.
off here, I got to go help load up a truck. We just packed over 100 boxes of rosettes to go to one of our biggest shows of the year. And we mostly women working here, the ladies working here have been building these awards and decorations for months. And some of them, probably before I owned the place, we've been building a lot of this. And we're finally getting it to see it go out the door here this afternoon. And the feeling when a big show like that goes out the door is just amazing. And they get that sense of accomplishment. I get to be here to support them. Uh, you know, yeah, sure, on paper they work for me. I work here to serve them and to help them deliver these amazing products and be part of something that's really awesome.
That's
So it's very, very rewarding, very exciting.
that's a good way to put it. And I wasn't implying that you're this omnipotent figure that's, providing it. Um, they're getting their own labor and equity out of it as well. So uh, that's a whole other conversation about leadership and and um, yeah. I will say this, with your boundaries and your time commitments and everything that you're doing, I appreciate um, the fact that you were willing to sit down with me and have this conversation and spend some of that time. I've said it before, it's a finite resource. We don't get it back, to come onto
You know,
my silly little podcast.
some of the amazing people you've had on here, and you got some world beaters that have been on here, some of which I know, some of which I know by reputation. Heck, I'm just honored to be included in the group. I'm kind of bringing the average back down a little bit here with a little bit of humility. Uh,
You know what? I want the average folks. And and you're above average, Greg. You truly are, from a character standpoint, and as far as my own journey has been, from a mentorship standpoint, you've been huge. Um, you know, I want to have the world beaters and all that, but for every one of them, there's 10,000 more guys like me and girls, uh, that I want to have blue belts. I've had a blue belt. I've had a purple belt. I don't know if I've had a brown belt yet. It's turning into a lot of black belts because I've been very fortunate that I've met a lot of good people as long as I've been doing this, even though I'm, still, struggling. I'm not struggling, I'm training, but as I chug along in my own journey, I've been able to meet some fantastic people. And so far, I haven't really had a lot of people say no to being on the show, including guys like Vitor and I'm chasing down Mike Casey and Pedro Valenche and some other folks, Elliot Marshall. He'll be on soon. But I want to get a white belt. I want to find the right white belt that can, you know, has just started and so it's still fresh. What it's like to start, because kind of like I said, I've kind of forgot how much my life changed when my son Ian was born. I think you go so far into this jujitsu thing that sometimes you forget a little bit about what it's really like to be a white belt, other than just knowing it sucks all the time.
Wish I could go back to white belt just to burn all those calories,
Right?
man.
Yeah.
But yeah, we talked about that before with
Yeah.
Robin. It's like what a great workout it was, and it's like now I'm so much more efficient, and
Yeah.
I don't burn calories.
Well, yeah, and actually one of the things I'm working on right now, Mike McLean, he did a cool seminar about breathing and the Wim Hof method, and so I'm trying so hard to roll in a way where I'm only breathing through my nose, and so I'm literally training and trying not to get a good workout in kind of a backwards way, to become efficient enough to where my heart rate's not getting over a certain threshold. And so if I get good at that, then I'm gonna have to find other workouts too, because I like food. So, but again, Greg, thank you very, very much. I will definitely, I want to have you on again. And yeah, I think
Yeah,
that'll,
I mean, we talked about next time. Maybe we'll dive into the mental health journey. I've got some fun, harrowing tales of boy, a lot of trauma, lies, betrayal, fake identities, ayahuasca fueled healing sessions, jiu-jitsu community, and just the whole gamut. It's been quite a ride over these years, and I'm a big proponent of mental health, and especially for men. And I think that um, some of the experiences that I've shared, both with the challenges of mental health as well as the healing path.
yeah,
Hopefully that can help others, and I'd love to share that with you
yeah,
at some point.
that's, and I will appreciate that you're going to be willing to share those things. I've talked a little bit about some of the stuff that I've been through, and that, that involves, multi-state searching for kids, and name changes, and, all kinds of crazy, wacky things that people tell me I should write a book. But yeah, so we will talk soon. I hope you get your order out, and I'll make sure I hit up open mat up at Chitwood soon. Also, Sean, if you're listening, and Sean, if you're not listening, Greg, tell Sean to get back to me. I've been bugging him to get on the show, and I know he's busy, but let's make it happen. So, all right.
Will do.
That'll include
Glad to
this
hear.
episode of Still Rolling Podcast. If you're getting something out of this, please like and comment and share on my social media pages, as well as, if you're listening to this on or watching on YouTube, or if you listen to it on Spotify, make comments on the episodes. Give us some feedback. If you have a question about jiu-jitsu, go ahead and contact us. There's a link in Buzzsprout that allows you to click, and you can leave me a question so that I'll have it answered by whoever I have on the show. We'll talk about your question and cover the subject matter you're interested in. So again, I appreciate you listening, and I hope you're back next week.